There we go. Okay. Because I'm kind of soft-spoken, it would probably be hard for, yeah, good, very good. Yeah, okay. All right, well, good morning and welcome. I hope you're all refreshed this morning. Dan and I, again, just would like to thank you so much for the privilege of being here. And it's always some way God brings a blessing to us wherever we go, and this time is no different. And we really have been blessed to spend time with the pastor in his home. It's been a real good time. He's got a beautiful home and a beautiful area there where we go walking, and it's just been a real pleasure. So, and we've not got to get to know all of you, but hopefully today we can spend some time together too before we leave. So thank you for the prayer, Brother Tom. I don't know how many of you have heard of excitotoxins. Excitotoxins? Heard of it? Okay. Not too many people have. They're not very familiar with it. And yet I will guarantee that every one of you are ingesting excitotoxins. And we want to look at what they are and what the dangers of excitotoxins are. And now, I remember before I was a Christian, and I would see some health report or something, and I was like, these foolish people, everything gives you cancer, and I thought they're just out of their heads. And when we share some of these health talks, especially this subject here, dealing with excitotoxins, people say, well, why would they do that? They wouldn't do that. No human being would do that. But again, it's just like what I was sharing with prophecy yesterday. We have to understand that we have an enemy, and he's real. And that's what 1 Peter 5:8 tells us. It says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. He hates Jesus Christ. He did all that he could to Jesus Christ while he was on this earth, and he failed. So now he's attacking the apple of his eye. He knows that it causes Jesus pain when his children suffer, and he delights in suffering. And so he wants to inflict disease upon the human beings. And so this is a real thing. And yes.
Teach us to be serious, sober-minded, and vigilant in some of the things we're talking about.
Thank you for pointing that out. Thank you very much, because I wanted to address that, and I was going to put my most emphasis at the end, and you'll see. But thank you, because I can begin with that too. We are to be sober and vigilant, because these things are not just for us to share with you. Just because we enjoy up here talking, I enjoy meeting you, but I don't enjoy standing up here necessarily talking. But to a greater extent, it says, beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. And so God wants us to prosper, not just our spiritual well-being, but our physical well-being. And actually, they're interconnected. That's really what this verse is saying. You can't really fully prosper spiritually if you're not fully prospering physically. And Paul tells us that too in 1 Thessalonians 5:22 or 23, that, he desires that we be sanctified wholly, physically, spiritually, and mentally. The whole well-being needs to be addressed. And so goes back to what you were saying, Tom, in this next scripture verse, then we'll get into excitotoxins. Paul says, what? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own? Did you know that you're not your own? It says, for ye were bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. They're his. And so this is the reason why we do it, not because I know it's the right thing to do, but because I'm not my own. And Christ paid an infinite price. It was a great sacrifice for you and I. So let's take a look at excitotoxins. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Dr. Russell Blaylock. He is, if you go online to search excitotoxins, probably 95% of what you're going to find is from Dr. Russell Blaylock. He is a retired neurosurgeon, and he spent a lot of his life sharing information on his research that he has found dealing with excitotoxins. And he wrote a book. I highly recommend this book. I have it. It's Excitotoxins, the Taste That Kills. Okay, so everything that I'm going to share with you today is from his book or from his lectures that he has online. Okay, so every reference you see was taken from there. Now, I want to tell you too, when I began this medical missionary journey in my life and making changes in my life was about 12 or 13 years ago. And on the internet, you could research very successfully in these subjects such as excitotoxins or medical missionary work. It is getting very, very difficult. That information is all but hid. When I go back to update these presentations, it is hard to find this information again. You have to really research. You have to be very specific. So, and I don't think that's an accident. I don't. Not from all the things that I see. So what is an excitotoxin? Let's get into what is an excitotoxin. It is a substance which causes a pathological process by which nerve cells, including brain cells, I emphasize that because the brain is the only avenue, and Satan knows this, that God can reach mankind. So this is his special attack, specifically upon the brain. Now they are damaged and killed by excessive stimulation. Thus, the term excitotoxic means death. It's going to kill. It's going to bring about death. So, something to understand. I'm going to share some physiology with you because you need to understand some physiology. I don't understand it all, but I'm sharing with you what I think is necessary to understand what the results of excitotoxins are and how it can and will affect you, and how we can make this connection of excitotoxins with the diseases that we're saying today that are prevalent, okay? So, brain cells are part of our nerve cells, and they're part of the central nervous system. We'll get into that a little bit more. So, now, just by the definition of what I've given you on excitotoxins, is this something you would choose to eat? No, of course not. Why would you want your brain cells damaged or killed? You wouldn't. But I will guarantee you 100% of you are eating it. Guarantee you. Okay, let's take a look. So where did excitotoxins come from, or were they first? There was a scientist in Japan, I can't pronounce his name, but he was, as scientists do, they like to do research. In certain foods that he was eating, he was noticing some of them had more flavor than other foods. And he was wondering, why would that be? And so he started doing research, and it was in this seaweed that he extracted MSG. How many of you have heard of MSG? Okay, most of you have heard of MSG. That is an example of an excitotoxin. And we're going to look at other examples of excitotoxins, okay? So now, since that time, we know of the 4 taste senses that are within our mouth. Now, I don't know, I just learned this when I was studying this a few years ago, that umami is a new taste. I did not know that. It was added to the tastes that you see here, the sweet, sour, bitter, and salty that we are familiar with, but it's called umami, okay? So, how did this get to the United States of America? Well, in World War II, as wars go, you capture the enemy, and these were some of the troops that had gathered together some of the rations from these Japanese soldiers. Well, they didn't have their rations, and so they opened them up and they started eating their rations. And they thought, wow, why do their rations taste so much better than ours? You know, the rations, if you've seen them in the tin cans, they tasted very tinny. And so they took it back to the people in the army, and they discovered the ingredient that was in there was indeed this MSG that gave it this wonderful flavor, this wonderful taste. So we want to look at what is MSG. You've heard of MSG, but what is MSG? It stands for monosodium glutamate. Now, we want to look at this glutamate, but glutamate is essentially an amino acid, but it also plays another role that's important. Now, amino acids, we know that they're building blocks for proteins, but MSG has been added to many foods and drinks since 1945 as a taste enhancer. Now, we already know what it can do to you, and the only reason why it's added to your food is because it makes it taste better. Now, we have to answer for ourselves, is the reward worth the risk? That each of us has to make that determination. But MSG is primarily made from fermented sugar or starches, okay? So, why is it in our foods then? If it's causing damage and it's just for a taste enhancer, we're going to unpack this. But let's look at what is glutamate. We already mentioned that glutamate is an amino acid, but it also plays another role. It's also a neurotransmitter in our central nervous system. Now, this is important to understand. Now, our central nervous system, that has several different neurotransmitters, but the main neurotransmitter is glutamate. Between 80 and 90% of the neurotransmitters within our central nervous system is this glutamate, okay? So this glutamate is part of this MSG, okay? So the central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spine. Now, the central nervous system controls the peripheral nervous system. I'm sharing these things with you not because I'm a wise person, because I'm not. But there's a reason for it, and I don't know why this is doing that.
Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah.
Let me check. We have the sequences.
I think it's back there. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to say a prayer, if that's okay. Our Father in heaven, I know the enemy wants to interfere and disrupt your work. And not that we're deserving or anything special, but we just ask your blessing that you would watch over the technology. It's far beyond my understanding. And so we put it in your care and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. So to understand that the brain and the spine is part of the central nervous system and it controls this peripheral nervous system. Now, what makes up the peripheral nervous system is two systems, the autonomic, which is the involuntary responses of the body, such as your heartbeat and your digestion. But there's also the somatic system. Those are the things that we voluntarily choose to do, such as walking, talking, and writing, running, etc. And this is important to understand again, because we're going to see how this is affected to the diseases that are connected with this nervous system. So, let's see. Oh, yes, that's what I was trying to remember. The central nervous system now is protected by the blood-brain barrier, okay? That was the other piece of information I was trying to remember. But the peripheral nervous system is not, okay? So, glutamate. Now, glutamate is found in very small quantities in the body, and it's found naturally in some of the whole foods. But what the problem is after it's processed, God knows how to make things. He puts it and packages it the way our bodies can respond to it properly. Okay, it's what man does to it that causes the problem. Now, we need to understand too that it is a non-essential amino acid. In other words, we don't need to bring it into our diets. Our bodies can produce it without bringing it in, okay? So the problem is the massive quantities when we ingest this glutamate. Remember, glutamate is a neurotransmitter within the central nervous system, okay? This is what stimulates your cells to react to stimuli that are around you. So, 1948, the U.S. Army invited the major food companies to introduce them to their discovery. Food companies were very excited because their foods, again, were packaged in tin and they tasted terrible. And so they thought, you know what, if we can make our foods better, guess what? We're going to sell more of our product. Well, you know how that goes, the competition. If one company's doing it, the other's going to do it because they have an unequal advantage then. And it did make the foods indeed taste better. So they all got into the bandwagon. The problem is that there was no testing done before this was done. And what really brought this to the surface was because they put it into baby formula. Now, you mess with the mama's baby, you're going to arouse Mama Bear. And that's really where they're stimulated now. There was research that then began on this. And there were two researchers, Lucas and Newhouse. Now, what they did in their research, I'm not sure why they determined to check on the retina cell, but they wanted to see what MSG would do with the cell of the retina. Well, what they found was that it destroyed the cells, and it also caused brain lesions on the mice that they were testing. And they thought this was interesting, and I thought this was interesting too, and I thought, okay, they researched this retina cell, so I thought, where is this retina cell? Where is it located? And to my right, it's within the central nervous system. This is important to understand. It's enclosed in that blood-brain barrier. Remember that, okay? But they found that it damaged the retina cells and it caused brain lesions with this MSG. So this research was done, but it was kind of poo-pooed and pushed aside because the food industry is a big, big, powerful industry. Matter of fact, when Dr. Russell Blaylock was bringing this information forward, many people warned him, even his attorneys said, don't do this because your life would be in danger. They will squash you. But he kept moving forward. And I believe it was God that was blessing him to continue this work. But in 1968, there was a neuropathologist and a neuroscientist. They started conducting their own studies using MSG and finding indeed that it did destroy these retina cells and it did cause these brain lesions as they first saw in this other experiment. But it caused these lesions that were very similar to strokes and Alzheimer's. Remember, this is a neurotransmitter dealing with nerves, with the nerves of the body, peripheral and the central. But these findings then, they were brought before the food industry. And the food industry would not do anything on their own. They finally had to go to Congress to have them to enact some laws to prevent them from putting this stuff into their foods, MSG, okay? Well, here was the food industry's argument. They said that MSG could not cross the blood-brain barrier. Well, they already showed that in research that it could indeed cross the blood-brain barrier. And they said because glutamate was naturally found in the body that it wouldn't be harmful. If it's in the small quantities that it's supposed to be in, yes, it's not harmful. But again, it's the massive quantities that were contained in MSG that would flood the body, and then it's a neurotransmitter. So when it's in the body, it's just firing off these, cells to fire off continually to the point where they would die. And so this was the industry's rebuttal against all of that. But there were studies that were conclusive that indeed it did cross. If somebody had, of course, then they had to go and they had to test and experiment and go through all of this process. When they showed previously that there was no injury necessary, but they come back and said, okay, if you've had a stroke, a head injury, seizures, MS, infections, brain surgery, certain drugs, heat stroke, irradiation, diabetes, high fever, hypertension, and there was another list that kept going on. They said if you've had these things, yeah, then your blood-brain barrier has been compromised and it can cross it. So they did come to that determination. So let's look at the blood-brain barrier. Now, some parts of the brain are not protected by the blood-brain barrier, okay? And we want to look at this too, because we're going to see how this possibly could be connected to some of the diseases and the issues that we're dealing with today. Now, I think most of you were here Friday night at my wife's presentation in regards to the liver. Now, this information I'm sharing with you, excitotoxins are not the only thing that are causing disease and issues. This is one of the many things, and this is one of the other things that is placing another burden upon the body that it has to deal with, along with all of the other toxins that are in our environment and in our foods, unfortunately. But the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the pineal gland, these are things that are outside of the blood-brain barrier. So these are very easily affected by MSG. So let's just look at some of the things that the hypothalamus and these other parts of the brain are involved with. The hypothalamus, it controls and regulates our endocrine glands, which are the thyroid. There's metabolism of the heart rate, mood, body temperature, parathyroids. It regulates calcium and phosphorus, the adrenals, and there are many more. I'm just listing some of the things. Regulate metabolism, works with our immune system, blood pressure, stress, testes, ovaries, reproduction, the pancreas, which secretes insulin and glucagon, and it also aids with digestion. So you can see that this is going to affect a large part of your body. This is not just a small thing. The hypothalamus, it controls our sleep-wake cycles. It controls our hunger and satiety, involved with our autonomic nervous system, heartbeat, peristalsis, the things we talked about, that's involuntary. The limbic system, which is our emotions, love, fear, anger, compassion, empathy, and the regulation of our immunity. And MSG suppresses our immune system. I'm not exactly how that all works, but I looked into it. But it's dealing with oxidative stress because it kills the brain cells, which then we have these free radicals in the body, and it just goes on to affect our immune system. But the pituitary and pineal gland, the pituitary regulates metabolism, growth, blood pressure, reproduction, and the pineal is with the releasing of melatonin. So we can see that this is not a small matter. This involves a large part of the process of our body functions. So I want to look at another thing too. Again, as you get mothers involved with this, things can get done. But the placental blood barrier, they tested on pregnant mice. They were fed MSG, and their offspring were compared with the offspring of mice not fed with MSG. And they found intellectually impaired having severe reductions of norepinephrine, which helps the brain to focus and concentrate and to pay attention. Does that ring any bells? It should. We see that on the rise within children, even within adults now. But it was also found that there was 80% reduction in the frontal lobe of acetylcholine, which is vital in the process of learning and memory and complex problem solving. And this is where we make our moral decisions, is in that frontal lobe. And so can you imagine what decisions we're going to make with an 80% reduction of acetylcholine? You're probably not going to be making very good decisions. And this is why I say this was the part of the presentation that really drew my mind to the fact that Satan has studied in the laboratories. He understands how to affect our brains, and he knows he can reach us through that area and that God can only reach us through that area. So this moral decision process has been hindered because of these excitotoxins. And this acetylcholine is also linked to Alzheimer's. It's the lack of this acetylcholine. So what things can we put into our lives to increase the choline to bring this back? Well, here's just a list of some of the ingredients. Some of these are pretty common. Some of these are herbs, which you can use in your cooking. Again, garlic, I mentioned, I think it was here. If you're going to use garlic, try not to heat it. Eat it, yeah, right. You can crush, yes, because you want to activate the allicin, yes. Right. Mm-hmm. Oops, did you? Oh, you want to get that? Okay.
Choline is what? In your camera helps do what?
The acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter in the frontal lobe. And so these excitotoxins destroy that. Yeah, it's for memory and our moral decisions. Right. This brings back that choline within the, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to just repeat some of the things we were saying so that for the recording that they get it. The question was, what was the choline for? And then you were just repeating. I just wanted people to know the question.
Right. Thank you. Some more information regarding excitotoxins. Intrauterine, the sensitivity up from intrauterine up to the age of 4 to excitotoxins is 4 times greater than in an adult, because their minds are so plastic. And that damage that they receive, they found that this damage is permanent. This cannot reverse at this age. So that's why I mentioned earlier, the brain disorders that we're seeing within children, they're skyrocketing. And when I learned about excitotoxins, I started going to the grocery store and looking, and I've got one example I'm going to show you of an ingredient list of one product that you're going to see. But many of the products I would look at would have anywhere between 10 and 15 different ingredients containing MSG. They're loaded with MSG.
So are you saying the different forms of different names of MSG? Is that what?
We're gonna
Okay,
touch into
perfect,
that.
perfect.
We're going to touch into that. I'm just going through all of the evidence that they're finding, and then we're going to see what they had to do because of this. They're finding this also was causing cancer. Now remember, this excitatory process, it was damaging and killing cells. This is causing free radicals. That's basically what cancer does. So it had the same effect as cancer, and it was leading to cancer because of these free radicals. So when you are looking at labels, and the label says no MSG, is it safe? Is it safe? Well, this is where we're going to get to on your question or your comment. Because of all the research that I just shared with you, some of it anyways, MSG was receiving such bad press that food companies had to do something. So the FDA told them that they did not have to label MSG if it was not 99% pure. So what they did then is they reduced it below 99%, and we're going to look at what they've done with it all. So if it says no MSG, that does not mean that there's not MSG in it. It means that it's not 99% pure, but it's there. But we're going to look at it too. When we have all of these different excitotoxins in there, you're beyond what 99% pure MSG could do. So what if your packaging says no added MSG? Is it safe? No added MSG is deceptive as well, because it is simply added under a disguised name. And we're going to look at that. All of these names, I've got graphs here, charts we can look at. And excitotoxins, as I was mentioning earlier, they work synergistically. That means the more that you have ingredients of the excitotoxins, they add together, and so you get this huge, massive amounts of MSG in the food. Now, again, remember, MSG is non-essential. We don't need to have it in our foods. It is found naturally in some foods, like tomatoes. It's high in cheese and mushrooms. But again, it's as God packaged it, as we break it down, it's released slowly, and there's small amounts in that food, okay? So I want to touch on something else too. I've done a presentation on sugar, and it's very interesting, but I wanted to touch on this too. Is sugar-free safe? Now, sugar-free, I'm sure you've all heard of aspartame. It's in NutraSweet and Equal. This is in the studies that Dr. Russell Blaylock did. He said anything labeled sugar-free, diet, low-fat, low sugar will contain MSG. Okay? Aspartame contains the amino acid aspartate, which is also another neurotransmitter. Okay, so the body again is getting overflooded with these neurotransmitters, causing all this stimulation within the nerve cells and this death. In 1981, the former FDA toxicologist, Dr. Adrian Gross, said, "It is clear beyond any shadow of a doubt that aspartame caused cancer in laboratory animals." So I've got another slide coming up that shows how many studies at the time I'd done this that they've done to prove this, and yet it's still in our foods. Okay? So who owns a patent for aspartame? Anybody ever hear of Monsanto? Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Roundup, glyphosate. But once aspartame is in the body, it changes chemically into formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is not a good substance. It's classified with the poisons as cyanide and arsenic. And when a product containing aspartame is heated to more than 86 degrees, which our body temperature is what? Typically, it depends. It varies a couple degrees with individuals. It causes a brain-causing byproduct. I can't pronounce the name, but these things all have been proven. So I found this slide online too. I don't remember where I found this, but I thought it was interesting that people would be so bold as to go against Coca-Cola to put their products on this. But artificially sweetened beverages can triple your risk of stroke and dementia or Alzheimer's, because remember, it affects the central nervous system, which controls these functions that bring about homeostasis. Aspartame is the #1 consumed artificial sweetener in America, causing anything from depression to weight gain, and has been linked to brain tumors. In 1985, Monsanto bought the company credited with aspartame's invention, and since then, over 900 published studies have come out revealing the detrimental effects of aspartame. And now this presentation I put together about 3 years ago. And so I'm sure there's over 1,000, I'm sure, maybe even more, I don't know. But it's very well documented, and yet it's still allowed to continue to be put into our food and our drinks. Now, something else I found too, that it was, according to the FDA, approximately 80% of all adverse food reactions were linked to aspartame. Now, aspartame was getting a bad name, just like MSG was, so they had to do something different. So now we have neotame. In 1998, a letter to the FDA, H.J. Roberts, author of Aspartame Disease, An Ignored Epidemic, this was the book he wrote, called neotame a synthetic variation of aspartame, but it's about 40 times more potent. So yeah, they maybe use aspartame less, but I still see it being used a lot. So now they're replacing it with neotame. Now, this was information I didn't get from Dr. Russell Blaylock, but this was from the Harding Medical Institute. Now, the FDA says it's 7,000 to 13,000 times sweeter than sugar. And people like their sugar. And people think that sugar is harmful, which added sugar indeed is harmful, but they think that these artificial sweeteners are a good substitute.
Right.
And they're not. They're not.
They're worse.
They're worse. There are sweeteners that we can use if you need to have a sweetener, and there's nothing wrong with sweeteners, but again, even good things we have to do in moderation. Honey would be a good raw honey, I would say. And 100% pure maple syrup is another good one, but make sure that it's 100% pure.
What about guava?
Pardon?
Guava, what about guava?
In the research I found, no.
Say it. Say the word. For the
Guava. Yeah, in the research, I looked that up because it's in the processing of it. I can't remember, but I researched that when I put together my presentation on sugars, and I found that. I don't remember, but yeah.
What about
Well-
stevia?
Stevia, yes. Very good.
It's good.
Yes. I do that in my sugar presentation, yes.
The high,
High fructose corn syrup. Yes, stay away from that.
I don't want to interrupt your presentation too much, but a few slides back, you talked about they did studies in lab animals and it caused cancer in all of them. And I couldn't help but think we've become the lab animals. Yeah. That's what's happened.
That statement I would agree with. Yes. I would agree with that, unfortunately. Yes. Stevia. Yes. I mean, you can use other sweeteners. I'm sure you folks that cook, you know, you can blend up dates, and berries are very good. They're not high in sugar, but they do contain it. Bananas are higher in sugar. But yeah, there's a lot of other options that we can use if you have a sweet tooth. I would definitely not recommend artificial sweeteners. There's a little more information on neotame here. You can read it, but there are other artificial sweeteners I have listed here. Stay away from those: advantame, sucralose, and saccharin. So if you see those, normally found in Sweet and Low and Splenda, you've probably heard of those things. So what we want to do now is to look at a list of these ingredients, okay, that we mentioned. Now, on this list here, if you see this ingredient, any of these ingredients on a label of something that you're purchasing, it will always contain MSG. Always, okay?
Did you say MFG or SG?
Now, MFG is basically the same thing. It stands for manufactured free glutamate. It's the process of making it rather than the actual MSG.
So all nutritional yeast says MFG in it?
It has MSG. It's processed or considered manufactured free glutamate, but it is MSG, okay? It contains MSG.
right, and that was.
Now, this one really troubles people because people love nutritional yeast flakes.
Yeah.
Why?
Tastes good.
Yeah, should that tell you something? A little bit of something. Yeah, they're nutritional. They're very nutritional. But I will challenge you that you would probably find a very difficult time to find anything nutritional in it. Now, I've gone online and I've researched this several times because many Seventh-day Adventists use nutritional yeast flakes. And when I share this, they just look at me and they want to start crying.
What are we going to eat now?
But what I had to do, I'll tell you, because I researched the company that makes the yeast flakes, they claim that it does not contain MSG. So what I did then is I went to how is MSG processed? And then I went to how nutritional yeast flakes are processed. And nutritional yeast flakes are processed the same exact way that MSG is processed. It's the same process. You can't avoid it from being MSG. So I went and I proved it for myself. So they can claim what they want, but according to the process of creating MSG, that's exactly what the process they do to make nutritional yeast flakes. So it cannot possibly not contain MSG.
I think it's important to note too that if you're using vitamin supplements and so forth, a lot of times they bind those to glutamates because their theory that they explain is that the body can process it faster, but it's because of that glutamate, I'm sure, that's in it that brings the speedy delivery to the central nervous system. But I think so you need to read the labels even of your vitamins that you're taking and so forth, because a lot of times they're bound to a glutamate also.
And you bring up a very good point, because you're going to be surprised some of the places that we're finding this put in. That's very good. Thank you, Brother George. Most what? Breads? Most breads are created, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're creating MSG. It's how it's processed. It's what they do with the yeast, the process they do with the yeast that creates the MSG. It's the salts that are within it that they're trying to draw out. That's why it's called monosodium. It's the salt. Yeah. Okay, so this list, they will always contain MSG. But what they've done, again, you can see they'll put it under all these different names to hide the fact that there's MSG in this food. Here's a list that often contain MSG. Now, I say often because now when you look at processed foods, many of them contain what they call natural flavors. So that one really, unless you've tested it, you really won't know, because some do actually use natural flavors that are not artificially natural. But most foods are artificially flavored, which will then produce MSG.
And they say that the natural flavor, from what I've read, makes you crave it. Like, what's in that natural flavor?
Makes you crave.
That's what MSG, that's why it's in our food, because they want you to eat more. Have you ever heard the saying from Lay's potato chip? I bet you can't eat just one. That's why, because it's loaded with MSG. Yeah, you want to eat more. That's why the food industry wants it in their food. That's why we have such an epidemic of obesity and all of these diseases. People keep eating nutrient deficient food and they can't stop because it tastes so good. They keep eating it, and then the body says, I'm not getting the nutrients I need more food. So they keep eating and eating and eating and eating. And we keep getting more and more obese, and we're still nutrient deficient. Yeah. Soy milks. We have to be label conscious.
Is there a way to tell on the label, soy milk, for instance?
Well, there's one here, this Carrageenan. You find that in a lot of non-dairy milks. That, most of the time, but not always, I guess, but does contain MSG. Here's another list that these are suspected. Now, if you talk to Dr. Russell Blaylock, who has done the research, these would be on a different list. But this is the list that I found, and so I'm just taking it according to that. But again, I highly recommend that you get his book. It'd be far more informative than what I'm sharing with you. It's Excitotoxins, the taste that kills. Dr. Russell Blaylock. So where can MSG be found? It's in almost all processed foods, again, because they want their food to be eaten. They know the advantage to that. But even this surprised me. The wax that they put on the produce and the fruit to make it look good, they put it in that as well. They're finding it in there. Why is that? Same thing. They want you to eat their product. Medications. They want children to be able to take medications. You know how children fight against medications. So let's put something in there to make it taste really good. How about vaccines? Over 35 different vaccines that were tested were found glutamate in there. Why would glutamate be in there? There's absolutely no reason. Soaps, cosmetics, shampoos, sunscreen, skin creams, insect repellents, dog food, cat food. These are just a list of a few things where MSG is being found. So, no.
Yeah, our pets don't need it.
Yeah. So I want to show you it. This is on a label of a canned packaged food that I had seen. I went through the ingredients and I underlined them and highlighted them. These are on the list of always contain MSG. This is one product, one food item right here. There are 21 known ingredients containing MSG in this one food. Does anybody want to guess what that food would be? No?
Thinking something like.
Oh. All these wonderful, good eating Seventh-day Adventists.
Especially since they were bought out.
Well, Satan, I believe this is his special attack to make supposedly God's children that he has chosen to take this message to the world, giving them a supposedly better option to actually eating meat. And when this really is destroying the brains of those that are eating it.
Notice, does it say vegan up there in blue letters? Does it
Yes.
say vegan?
It says vegetarian, I think.
I
Is
think
it
it says
vegan?
vegan. Loma Linda promotes vegan.
It's vegetarian.
Okay, okay.
Sure. Oops. And so what I did is I started going through these canned Loma Linda, and it's not just Loma Linda, it's also Worthington, both companies. How else do you take soy and you make it taste like, I mean, you have to do something to it. You know, so you need all of these flavor enhancers. And it is really destroying the minds of good people. And this needs to be talked about. I remember I did this presentation a few years ago, and it was very upsetting to a few people, but they claimed it was better than eating a meat, and I don't know. Knowing this, I'm really not so sure. I would never promote meat eating, though. I would just avoid both of them. That would be me. Let's see, am I going the right way? Oops, okay. But, you know, even getting back to these packaged foods, Worthington was bought out, but we have been given counsel to move to the country. And this is just more evidence for that, to grow our own foods, because when you go out to the garden, you don't have to look at an ingredient list. But even we have some friends too. My wife just left. I was going to ask her who they were, but they worked in the Worthington factory. And you can add, I believe if it's under 2% of the ingredients, you don't have to label it. And she said that a friend of my wife's was working there, that they were carting meat around and they were adding meat to the ingredients of the food at this facility. I'm not saying that was anywhere else, but anyway, it's come to the point where it's such a shame that, you know, you should be able to go to the grocery store, even if you can go to buy produce, you know, and you look at a nice juicy apple, and there's potential that there's MSG in that wax that they coat it with. It just, you know, you really have to question, why am I even in the grocery store? But anyway, MSG is known to cause migraines, seizures, blurred vision, increased appetite, overeating, infertility, reproductive disorders, impaired brain function, cancer, heart and cardiovascular damage, ADD, ADHD, heart palpitations, tremors, headaches, violence. It's also known to increase susceptibility and enhancement of ALS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Huntington's disease. Now, these things we know are neurological diseases, and we've already shown that this does affect the nervous system clearly. And so we can see that this will play an impact with these neurological diseases. And it makes sense too with the effect of the neurotransmitters that these brain functions are being more and more escalated. Again, this isn't the only thing, but it's playing a part in the process of these diseases. You know, and Dana and I, we seldom eat out, very seldom, but sometimes when we're traveling, you know, we do. And so it was so interesting. We stopped at this Chinese restaurant and we said, do you make your food with MSG? And some of them, they would tell us, no, we don't. And so we would eat, and then we experienced this taking place. And there's a name for that. It's called Chinese restaurant syndrome, because their foods are known to be loaded with MSG. You know, but one of these restaurants we went to, and we asked them, do you put MSG in your food? And he looked, and he was an Oriental man. He goes, what do you think? Everybody uses MSG. If they tell you they don't use MSG, they're lying. You know, at least he was honest, you know, and I appreciated that. He knows that MSG is being used, and the reason they use it. Soy sauce is loaded with MSG. So, go ahead.
What about Bragg's amino acid? Does that have MSG, or do you not know?
In the process of making that, yes. We have to watch, you know, what I'll say is, what I would encourage you to do is to do your own research too. Do your own research, because it's what brought conviction to me. I heard of these things before too, but until I got into the studying and seeing the results of what they do in my brain, I know I'm challenged enough. And if the devil could, if it was possible for the devil to deceive the very elect, we better have sharp brains and committed brains. So what are some helpful things to combat MSG? Remember, it's causing all these free radicals damage. So vitamin C is an antioxidant. Whatever's high and has a good ability of antioxidant, like glutathione, very strong, very good against antioxidant. Vitamin C, vitamin E, magnesium. Foods high in antioxidants are garlic, ginger, turmeric, blueberries, strawberries, goji berries, kale, artichoke, raspberries. Now, this is just a list of a few things, but again, go and do your research. You know, these are just, you can find if there's things that you like to eat, you know, maybe add that a little more if it contains, or if it's high in antioxidants.
Yeah, I look at the list of ingredients, and after hearing Dana's talk Friday on the glyphosates, it's better if we have our own garden.
Absolutely.
Because kale was one of the biggest things that has the glyphosates.
Yeah, it's one of the most heavily sprayed products with glyphosate. Yep.
I see pomegranate juice up there.
I'm not sure about pomegranates. I don't know. I know bananas are one of the most heavily sprayed too, if you need to get those organic. I can't remember. They spray them like, I want to say 20 times a year or something. It's outrageous. I was shocked when I was reading that information. So things that are high in antioxidants, add those into your diet any way that you can, and then read labels, reduce those that have MSG. Again, something that would be better is move to the country and grow your own foods, because it's not just excitotoxins that are a problem. Even if you buy organic or non-GMO, most of the things that you get out of the grocery store are grown on grounds that are just deplete in minerals. So you might be eating something that's organic, but it just doesn't have the nutrients in it. My wife and I, when we had our farm in Kentucky, we had a 1/4 acre garden just for produce, and then we had another 1/2 acre for grains in our fruit trees. But we had our ground tested where we were at. In that little 1/4 acre plot, we added 2,000 pounds of amendments to bring that back to where it should be. 2,000 pounds on a 1/4 acre. But you should see our produce. It was amazing, and it had flavor. It really did make a difference. Now, when grounds are that depleted, you know, Dan and I don't believe in supplements, but to get to the point where you need to be, just like with the garden, you know, we supplemented it until we could do our own composting and add it in naturally that way. So, be sober, be vigilant, right, Brother Tom? Mark 15:23, it says, and they gave him to drink wine mingled with myrrh, but he received it not. Why wouldn't he receive it? Who is this speaking of? Jesus. Why wouldn't he receive it? He knew that it would affect his brain. It would affect his mind, the wine. He did not want that within his body. So, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Is there any other questions?
I just want to say that text before, if he would have been offered lemon juice and myrrh, he would have drank it.
Probably.
While we're taking any few remaining questions for this topic, let's take up the offering at this time. George, you wanna grab the plate, and Phil, if we want to do both sides.
No. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, okay, here.
Yeah, can MSG be washed off fruits and vegetables?
That can be.
MSG can be washed off fruits and
Because
vegetables.
they place it in that wax. And soap, you can wash that wax off.
With soap and water?
We use vinegar because soap contains a lot of things that are not
Okay.
good either. So we use vinegar to clean our produce. A mix, not straight vinegar. We don't, it's white. Yeah.
You guys have questions? Okay, I think
Okay.
I've asked, I don't think anybody has any more questions, so we can end today's. We can, before, I just want to let everybody know that we'll come back in 10 minutes. Let's give 11:15. And I also want to remind everybody that next month in July, we are going to be, for our health topic, our medical missionary topic that month, we're going to be going out to Karen's property, and we're going to be looking for herbs for medicinal and edible purposes. Bring your blue folders that she shared with us 2 years ago so that you can identify them yourself, walk around her property and identify those various herbs and weeds and things like that that just grow naturally, so that we can know how to identify them and then learn how to use them. Right, so that we can learn what's in our own yard even. As a matter of fact, when Kalon and Dana came to my house, I have a little stone garden and had some weeds popping up around the edge, and they walked along. They're like, oh, wow, you have blah, blah, and you have blah, blah, and you have blah, blah. I'm like, I have all of these medicinal weeds growing in my stone garden that I had no idea. So I'm learning also. So yeah, I gotta spray them with the weed killer. So July 19th, is that our date? July 19th, and we're meeting at Karen's house at 10 o'clock. Bring lawn chairs and your blue folders. If you don't have a blue folder because you never got one, she will provide them, but prefers you to bring what you had. So anyway, that concludes today's 10 minutes. Okay, and any other books that you might have to help identify different herbs and things like that, or weeds. Okay. Plants. Okay.